VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling, for fans, by fans.
Welcome to our second edition of our VeloVoices podcast. This is Panache, and again, I'm joined by Tim and Kitty in London. Hello, you two. How are you tonight?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. Tim, how's it going?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
Well, I think our first podcast got some pretty good feedback. We had a lot of listeners, and we got some people seem to appreciate what we're doing, so I guess we're going to go for number 2. Tonight we're going to be talking about what's gone on the last 2 weeks since our last podcast. We're going to talk about Luigi Gate. I'm sure Kitty's looking forward to that. We're going to talk about the Tour of Qatar a little bit. We'll be doing a little section about the top fan tweets. We wanted to talk a little bit about how we consume pro cycling so that fans can find some of the sources that we listen to. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with what's happening in the next 2 weeks, and we'll end with a little section we call the sprint finish. So with that, Tim, why don't you let us know what's happened in the world of pro cycling since our last podcast?
Okay, well, it might still be winter, but the French season is now definitely in full swing. We've had the one-day GP La Marseillaise, which was won by Justin Joule of La Pont Marseille. And we've also had 2 fairly major stage races. We've had Étoile de Bessèges, that was won by Jonathan Hiver of Sojasan. And he took the overall despite finishing no higher than 6th, I think it was, on any of the 6 stages. And today, that's to say Sunday, also saw the end of the Tour of the Mediterranean with Thomas Löfqvist, formerly of Sky, displacing Maxime Montfort on the final stage after the Radio Shack rider had benefited from being the best placed contender when the peloton blew up on Montfaron yesterday.
Yeah, and Löfqvist is a teammate of Hausler's, right, on IAM?
Yep,
yeah, okay,
that's right. So obviously that's the first win of that's the first win ever for the new IAM team. So that's a pretty good start for them.
I think it's the second win ever. I think their kit is the first win, Tim. It's a brilliant looking kit. So okay, what else happened?
That's it. We've also had the Challenge Mallorca. That's a collection of 4 one-day races that are all based, not surprisingly, on the island of Mallorca. Alejandro Valverde won the only climbing stage ahead of Sky's Sergio Henao. While the 3 flatter stages were shared between Lotto's Kenny Dahay, who won the opening stage, and Orica Green Edge's Lee Howard, who took the other 2, with Tyler Farrar, who does seem to be to sprints what Raymond Poulidor was to the Tour de France, taking a pair of second places.
Oh, that's rough. It's like second place. Okay.
And then on your side of the pond, we had the cyclo-cross Worlds, which were held in Louisville, Kentucky, where they celebrated a Dutch double. The men's race was won by Sven Nys for the second time, I think, and the women's race was won by Marianne Vos, or Vos the Boss, and that's the 5th time in a row that she's won it.
Yeah, she. I mean, the way she wins races too, she just kind of goes off the front and just nobody ever sees her again. You know, I thought that the race in Louisville was brilliant, and I just wanted to spend just a moment talking about the race organizers who saw that the weather was going to turn bad and basically had to move the Sunday races to Saturday. So they had all the races in one day: the juniors, the under 23 men, and then the women's and men's race. And I don't know if you saw the course the next day, but they made the right call. It was completely flooded. Feet of water had come onto the course. And I also thought that, kudos to those guys for having to do a vast amount of changing and reorganizing at the last minute to make the race so brilliant. I also thought the race was great because the weather turned a little sour on Saturday. It was snowy, and it was just all the things that you consider to be great in a cyclocross race. There was snow, there was mud, there was wind and water. So what a great race. And 10,000 American fans showed up to watch the race. I mean, if you were watching it on the UCI channel, which I was doing, it almost looked like you were in Belgium. seeing this thing. So I mean, that's how many fans there were there. So it was great for the United States to be able to have the World Cyclo-cross Championships come here, and I think looking back on it, was really successful. So grateful for the UCI choosing the United States and Louisville. Kudos to them for pulling off such a great venue and a great race. And the racing was fantastic. If you watched it, it was exciting the entire time. So one thing that happened at that race that was really interesting was the podium ceremony. Did you guys catch that?
I didn't know, but I've heard all about it.
Well, I have the audio here. Let me play a little clip.
The medal ceremony of the International Cycling Union Cyclo-cross World Championships for elite men. The medals and jersey will be presented by Mr. Pat McQuaid, President of the UCI.
Okay, so there you go. What do you think of that, you guys?
Hey, Pat's either very brave or very stupid, or quite possibly a little bit of both.
I've got to say, he's got very thick skin, if that didn't bother him at all.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was interesting to see the riders actually look at each other on the podium as Pat was being booed. It was a really awkward moment. But, obviously the U.S. fans let Pat know what they think of his competence as the president of the UCI. All right, Tim, what else happened in the last couple of weeks?
Obviously we had Dutch dominance at the Cyclo-cross Worlds, and we also had some more Dutch dominance at the Ladies Tour of Qatar, where Kirsten Wild won 3 of the 4 stages and took the overall.
And I love the fact that Al Jazeera broadcasted the women's race in its entirety. You could get on there and you could watch the whole thing. And kudos to the Argonaut women, right? I mean, they were brilliant. So hopefully we'll get more women's broadcasting, just like we're seeing on Al Jazeera. Of all the networks that are broadcasting women racing, I would think Al Jazeera would be the last one. And maybe that's stereotypical, but kudos to them for broadcasting it. All right, so we also had some, unfortunately, we had some doping news in the last 2 weeks. Tim, you want to run us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, we had a little bit, didn't we? So, I mean, because obviously from the previous fortnight, we hadn't had enough of doping stories in the news with Lance and Oprah. But it's been a little bit open season on that front now, hasn't it? Over the last couple of weeks, we've had, the team formerly known as Rabobank, now known as Blanco, have not had the best of fortnights. We've had Michael Rasmussen coming out and admitting that he doped for most of his career, although according to him, no later than 2010. We've had Luis Leon Sanchez, who's been suspended by the team or rested by the team while he testifies in the Fuentes trial. And then most recently of all, we've had Mario Cipollini being accused in the Gazzetta dello Sport today. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, and you have to wonder how much more there is to come.
Yeah. These rumors of Rasmussen, or not rumors, but this admission by Rasmussen, it kind of that all points to Bjorn Ries, right? And you start to wonder, when is he going to finally speak up? You got to wonder about guys like Sastra and Contador, and obviously the Schlecks were on CSC, and Jens was on CSC, which leads us to Louisgate and Cancellara being associated with this whole Fuentes trial and this code name of Luigi. So, Kitty, let's start with you. How does it feel to know that your idol is potentially having feet of clay here?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously. If it proves that he was Luigi and all that, then obviously, he has to be banned. And that's sport. And, I'm not going to be like some of the fans that are like, no, it's not true or whatever. I mean, if it's proved, it's proved. And, you're either guilty or you're innocent. And however I feel about him as a rider or whatever, I mean, that, as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty black and white. What I do kind of what does kind of piss me off, and I might actually start swearing here any minute, is the fact that the way Tyler Hamilton is, because the whole thing came out when Tyler Hamilton had said, the rider who was Luigi, sort of had a run-in with, not the Rolling Rock. Well, what is it? Rock
Racing. Yeah.
Yeah, guys in the Tour of California, and of course everybody went back and Cancellara was the one that was speaking out, blah blah blah. I'm kind of not going to go into all of that stuff at the moment. But I kind of thought, for fuck's sake, Tyler, either out him or not. But this kind of thing, this is what I hate about Twitter, and this is what I hate about these doping scandals, is that there's so much rumor and innuendo, and, people will say, oh, there's no fire or smoke without fire and all that. It seemed to me that a lot of people on Twitter, a couple, quite prominent tweeters, seemed to take great delight in when these rumors come up with riders and things. And a lot of times I kind of wonder, well, do you actually like cycling, or do you just like doping in cycling so that you can be all self-righteous?
Right, like one day when the sport actually becomes, hopefully, and this might be a long ways away, but when the sport actually becomes clean, what are all these people going to talk about on Twitter?
Well, I know, and it's just, and it is kind of, let's let this trial take its course, and if there is evidence, it will come out and all that other stuff. But to drag riders through the mud, it is kind of crappy.
Yeah.
And also.
And I would lie if I'm guilty of it too. I've been guilty of it too. So it's easy to say, oh, these people who talk, but sometimes I'm that person. I just have to admit that I am. So.
And, sometimes I am. I mean, let's face it. When the Cipollini thing came out, did any of us think that wasn't true?
Right.
Because, but I mean, what I'm saying is, as far as Cancellara goes, I mean, I've been a fan of cycling long enough to know that it is not outside the realm of possibility for any rider to be done for doping, as far as I'm concerned. There's always that, that little bit of doubt. And you have to be ready for that. I think, I think there's only a few riders that I would be incredibly surprised if they were done for it, like say Taylor Phinney or Marco Panache. Those two particularly. I was thinking. I would also be really surprised if Carlos Sastre was, but so it kind of doesn't matter my feelings about Cancellara as a rider. It's I just kind of feel like it's just this feeding frenzy on doping as soon as somebody's name is connected in any sort of way. It's just for God's sake, I don't know.
Well,
anyway,
for me,
I don't think I've been very articulate in this, but
it's hard. You're flustered. He's your hero. For me, any rider, any rider before 2008. It wouldn't surprise me if they got popped. It just wouldn't. Now, afterwards, these new riders, like you're saying, Phinney, that would surprise me. So, Tim, what's your take? I mean, how do you feel about all this?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm gutted because, and to kind of follow on from Kitty's point, I think, any sport, whether it's cycling or football or tennis or any other major sport, has to have credible superstars. And Fabian is absolutely one of the superstars of the sport. Now, when you're talking about what's happened in the past, whether it's Armstrong or Chippo or Rasmussen or any of those guys, that's a completely different thing. But if we can't believe in the likes of Taylor Phinney or Pinotti or Cancellara or Cavendish or Gilbert, who can we believe in? What kind of sport does that leave behind for us at the end of it when all the dust is settled?
Yeah, well, I think it's, like I said, cycling is an endurance sport, but being a cycling fan has also turned out to be an endurance sport. And so there's a lot of pain and suffering that we go through and trying to trust these riders. And I think, though, that there's a bright future ahead. So let's leave that there, and we'll move on to actually some racing. And this last week, we had a fantastic race in the Middle East in Qatar. So, Tim, why don't you give us kind of just an overview of how that race unfolded?
Yeah, and it actually turned out to be a pretty good race, I think. And it's the Tour of Qatar, it's pretty much the flattest race on the cycling calendar. So it's very much one for the sprinters. I think Cherie refers to it as the Tom Boonen Invitational, and she's not really wrong with that.
Oh, if only Tom had been there.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's for a sprinters race. It's pretty good. It's got a very high chance of crosswinds, which does often shake up the racing, which we saw on the first stage, and it does give teams some good practice for the spring classics as well. So I mean, with Tom Boonen, who's won the race 4 times previously on the sidelines with his elbow injury. It meant that Omega Pharma Quickstep had to parachute in some barely adequate replacements. Not sure what his name was, Marks something or other. But in a nutshell, Cavendish basically stomped all over this race after BMC had laid down the marker on the first 2 days. So on stage 1, we had Brent Buchwalter recording only his second win as a professional after the wind had split the peloton. And then he consolidated his lead on stage 2 after BMC, driven very, very hard by Taylor Phinney, dominated the team time trial. But after that, basically, it was all Cav. Sometimes with a train, sometimes without. He won the last 4 stages all in a row with the kind of form actually that it's unusual to see from him this early in the year. Sorry, go on.
Well, I think we'll talk about maybe why that is in just a little bit. So, in that last stage, he crashed, Tim, and then he, with no lead-out train from 20 guys back, turns on the afterburners and wins by a half a wheel. So, you're right. This form is incredible for this early in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That finish on the final stage was amazing because he was nowhere. Coming into the last 400 meters, very much shades of Robbie McEwen at his finest. And you know what? After that, he could probably be forgiven for singing "I'm the King of the Sandcastles" with all his rivals. For me, the only shame was that there was no Greipel or Sagan or someone like a Matt Goss there to really push him a little bit harder. But you know what? He isn't going to complain about.
Well, yeah, and the problem was there was a Sasha Modolo for the first stage, but then he crashed and, had to leave the race. Along, Cohen de Court crash, which kind of wrecked the Argos train a little bit. For me, the highlight was obviously Buchwalter. Everybody thinks that the stage 1 is going to end in a sprint, and these guys, get out there, get in the crosswinds, and then Buchwalter realizes, hey, I can take these 2, and he goes for it, and a breakaway wins in Qatar. That's fantastic, right? And then obviously I thought Sky was going to actually win the team time trial. They looked super smooth, and I say super stealth in their Rafa clothing. But boy, the BMC, these young guns from BMC and their time trial prowess, 5 seconds on Sky, right? So good race. Kitty, any highlights for you from Qatar?
Oh, it's definitely stage 1 for me as well, because I'm not a big sprint fan anyway, so I always like it when somebody spoils their parade, really. But one thing that I did like about the Tour of Qatar is it was the first race that I tweeted this year, and that was really fun, and it seemed like we got all our old regulars back to chat during the race and everything. So I'm quite looking forward to keeping that up all year.
Yeah, I had to wake up at ungodly hours to tweet to tweet those stages, but it was worth it. I only missed 1 day, but it was a great race. All right, well, usually every week, I don't know a week that we haven't done this, Kitty compiles all the best tweets that she can find from Twitter that kind of sum up the happenings of what's gone on during the week. And it's usually a mix of, I think, comedy gold mixed with Kitty's great insights into all the people that she follows. And she keeps a tight tab. I'll tell you what, some of these tweets get by me, and no tweet gets by Kitty Fondue. All right, so what we thought we'd do this time is have Kitty talk about 3 tweets or 4 that happened in the last 2 weeks that were kind of her favorite tweets. And this is kind of to tip our hats to the fans who interact with us and encourage you to interact with us so that maybe your tweet will get on the podcast. So with that, Kitty, I'm going to hand it over to you and just let you talk about a couple of those tweets.
Okay, well, we're going to go back to 2 weeks ago. when I compiled the tweets of the week, I tend to, a lot of times actually, I have so many that I have to leave about half of them behind, because what I have to do is make sure that there's a story or there's a string or there's a thread, to it. And sometimes the best ones kind of get lost. But actually, I've been doing pretty good this year so far. But funnily enough, two of my favorite tweets from the week before last were from you, Chris. The first one was your signed copy of the Johan Brunel book that said, "To Chris, whatever it takes, JB." And then your wonderful, "Oh, the irony." I could tell you were hurting with that one. And then also, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Velocentric, so Alex Oates, love him. And your little OxyClean power washing, how to get your kit sparkling clean in the cyclo-cross, I thought it was really quite funny. But that was just because I would never wash stuff. But
I got that tip from WTF Kits, actually. So he's the kit expert. He told me that OxyClean is the thing that gets out the mud. So kudos to him.
It is. Then this week, and funnily enough, I just did the tweets of the week. I just finished it before the podcast, actually, which usually I wait till 5 o'clock on Tuesday morning to do it. But I got ahead of myself. And the one now, Garmin got all their bikes stolen at the tour of the Med. And I thought that Sue, who is, what is it, her name? Give It a Burl or something like that? Yeah, Give It a Burl. Her tweet was the best, which was, "Feel for Garmin boys, but good to see that other teams are showing spirit of pelotonmen, offering their bikes for the team to ride. Bravo." I don't know if they took that up, but I really like that tweet. So those are the 3 tweets.
All right. Well, I'm honored to be 3 of your favorite tweets. So, I had a favorite tweet, and you had posted on a Tweets of the Week this last week of the guy who dressed up like Noah for Cyclo-cross Worlds after I recognized the flooding and had asked people to dress up like Noah. He actually did. And so you can see that on Tweets of the Week from last week.
The power you have over your fans is amazing, really. What can I say, Panache?
Yeah, I don't know if they're fans, but all right, let's move on then. Okay, so what we thought we'd do is talk about how we actually consume pro cycling. There's so many different sources that we, the VeloVoices, look to kind of follow the sport. And so I thought we'd just spend a couple minutes today talking about those to make you aware so that you can follow them if you so desire. And if there's other ones that you know about that you want us to know about when we post the podcast, please send us some comments so that we can start following some of your sources. So I thought we'd start today, guys, with broadcasting. So who do you watch? When you actually sit down to watch a race, who do you tune into?
Well, for me, it kind of depends on who's got the best feed. If it's not on Eurosport, Eurosport is who I go to if it's on. And I think I'm one of the few people maybe that really thinks Sean Kelly is very funny. But yeah, so that would be my default. But obviously a lot of the races, a lot of the classics aren't, or the mini classics aren't on Eurosport. So nothing like a little clam bitching with Sporza.
I do love some clam bitching with Sporza. So I don't know what the actual word is in Flemish, but we think that clam bitching means a little bit, but we're not sure. But every time we hear it, of course, we tweet it. So I love Eurosport, and when I watch races, I really do try to get David Harmon and Sean Kelly through my feeds. Obviously, they don't broadcast Eurosport here in the United States unless you have some crazy satellite package or whatever. But I think that that David and Sean are some of the best out there. On NBC Sports here in the United States, they do show some of the races, and of course we have Phil and Paul and Bob Roll, and I'm not too particularly fond of their commentary. So sometimes what I do actually is I'll tune into the NBC Sports and I'll turn down the volume and I'll turn up the volume on David Harmon and Sean Kelly. So the other thing about NBC Sports that bothers me a little bit is sometimes they tune in a little too late. Like last year at Paris-Roubaix, Boonen is already off.
They miss everything.
Yeah, Boonen is already off the front on his, super time trial to the victory, and NBC Sports was just tuning in. So, I try to hit the Eurosport feeds, and the way I do that is through cyclingfans.com, which is a great site. And also steephill.tv. So if you're looking for feeds, people are always tweeting me, Panache, send me the feed. How are you finding these feeds?
It's all on Cycling Fans.
It's all there. It's all on those two sites, steephill.tv or cyclingfans.com. Now, when the tour comes on, a lot of times the race organizers will use Tour Tracker. So you can actually watch, they'll stream the event live on Tour Tracker so that you can watch the entire stages, and that's happened for the Tour de France, the Tour of California, and the Tour of Utah. And I think that everybody in the world can get on there and watch the stages in their entirety. So do that. Tim, I've noticed that you've been posting a lot of GCN videos lately. What do you know about GCN?
Not a huge amount, actually. I've only discovered them relatively recently, which probably makes me a little bit of a Philistine. But yeah, they're posting.
No, they've only just started. Sorry, they've only just started.
I'd explain it then. But no, I've been finding them. They do some pretty good, comprehensive stage reports that they post up on YouTube, usually within a few hours of the end of the race. They were certainly covering the Tour of Qatar and providing a little bit more colour than just basic highlights. So they're well worth a look.
Yeah. And obviously, one of the good things the UCI's done in the last 2 weeks, maybe the only good thing the UCI's done in the last year, is they actually are going to be broadcasting World Tour races on YouTube. And so I watched all of the cyclo-cross World Championships on the UCI channel. The commentary was a little bit dodgy, and I actually turned on some Sporza in the background so that I could hear some clam bitching. But it was the feed was really high quality, and I really enjoyed it. So that's kind of how we watch cycling. And of course, when I'm doing my live Twitter feeds, or these guys are doing their live Twitter feeds, we're watching a feed from Cycling Fans or Steep Hill, or we're watching it on Eurosport Live. So. Yeah. All right. How about now, Kitty? I know you subscribe to a couple of magazines too, as do I. So what magazines do you subscribe to, and what do you like about them?
Well, I subscribe to Cyclist magazine, which is this new one that's just only been out for the last 7 months or so, which I'm thinking of not subscribing to anymore because I never open it up because it just, I don't know, it doesn't really do anything for me. I had a discussion today on Twitter with a guy who'd sort of said, oh no, it's really good for, when you want to do rides and things like that. And being as I don't do that, that's probably why this magazine isn't for me. I also subscribe to Pro Cycling, which is my favorite of the, what's going on in racing right now. Because I just think that I think the magazine looks beautiful. I think they have a really good range of people that they cover, and they have all kinds of columns from new riders and management, stuff like that. So I really, really love Pro Cycling. And Rouleur is, I have every single issue except for issue 1. So I'm, and they are all pristine. In fact, I would not ever let anyone touch them, actually, because they're really quite precious. And I absolutely love Rouleur because of the photography, because of the, the fact that they're, happy to do a sort of 12 or 14-page feature on handlebar tape, or
right.
Or something like that. It's I think that they really get into the love of the sport, and it's kind of timeless the way they do it, because they don't really focus on like contemporary stuff. I mean, they would do the Tour de France, but they would do it in a way that it's almost it's completely timeless. It's not something that and they did this then and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I absolutely love Rouleur, except I am kind of, I was kind of pissed off when they did a whole big, huge feature on Kath Wiggins, but that's just me. But there you go. So those are the ones that I really love.
Rouleur is it's beautifully produced. The photography is beautiful, and the graphic design is great. I mean, that's a beautiful magazine. I subscribe to Velo, and I subscribe to Road magazine, and we also get Bicycling magazine at the house. Bicycling, I wouldn't suggest subscribing that to follow pro cycling and racing. But if you're just generally interested in cycling, it's fine to subscribe to. My favorite of the three is Velo. I think that Neil Rogers and Andrew Hood and Dan Worry and Matthew Bodine, those guys are doing a fantastic job. Ever since Neil's taken over as the editor-in-chief, that magazine has been riveting, and I look forward to reading it every month. And they are, they do a great job of covering the races and summarizing what's happened, but they also are doing a really great job of talking about the issues of the sport and coming up with some really great editorial ideas on how the sport can be fixed. And the other thing I love about Velo is you can interact with all those guys on Twitter, and they'll respond. They want to talk to fans. And so, and if you follow Dan Worry's tweets, I mean, there's nobody funnier on Twitter than Dan Worry. He's kind of like, if I could grow up to be anybody, it'd be Dan. And Matthew B, he has, he rides, and he's got the most beautiful independent fabricated bicycle that you've ever seen. So I really like those. I really like Velo. A couple of years ago I was kind of iffy on them, but I'm really high on them right now and what they're doing, and I think that magazine is spot on. Road is a large print magazine, and I like it too, but it's different. They do a lot of reporting on the domestic peloton here in the United States. And they also really do a lot of great articles on training, and especially training with power. So for me as a racer, I like to kind of dig into that a little bit and see, how do my numbers compare to, pros or whatever. And I realize that I'm never going to be a great racer. But it's interesting to kind of, try to leverage some of the techniques and training that the pros do. And so I appreciate that magazine a lot. Now, as far as, a lot of these places have websites as well. I follow, I get my cycling news from what I call the big three, cyclingnews.com, Velo News, and Velo Nation. How about you, Kathy? Is it the same?
Yeah, that's pretty much the same. One other thing that I would want to mention is that Pro Cycling have the tablet version of I think it's called Cycling News HD, which drops into your iPad every Wednesday, and I really like that. It's just a good way of getting really up to date on what's going on that week, and it's got some really beautiful pictures as well. So. That's just a shout out to them because I really do like that a lot.
So how about the news websites though? Which ones do you like the most?
I would probably say Velo Nation.
Velo Nation.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I also follow a lot of blogs, and one of the ones that I love the most is Inner Ring. I feel like I get a lot of my breaking news. I read everything that Inner Ring writes. And, I think it's a he. I don't know, he's kind of anonymous, so I'm assuming it's a he. Maybe that's bad. But he had an article last week about all the sponsors of the different teams and what those companies actually do, and I thought that was fascinating. So he always kind of comes with this kind of interesting angle, maybe something that you really haven't thought about or that you thought you knew, and then there's a really nice editorial blog about the detail of these things. So I follow that. I also follow Red Kite Prayer, which I love. Charles Pelkey is one of their authors. He's a lawyer who lives in Wyoming, and he used to be a part of the Velo News staff, but now he writes for Red Kite Prayer, and he is a fantastic person when it comes to analyzing a lot of the policy and laws of things like concerning doping. But he's also a passionate racing fan, and he used to be kind of the live, but before kind of Twitter started to occupy the space, you could follow his comments on Velo News as a race went by, and I really missed that. miss him doing that. I'm excited when he does do it occasionally. He does it on Red Kite Prayer. How about you? I know, Kathy, that you are close friends with the people at VeloCast. You want to talk a little bit about them?
No. Oh, God, I owe bloody Scott a lunch in Bruges because I made a stupid-ass vocabulary bet with him, and he took it. Although that said, I'm just going to make him harder and harder. No, they have a subscription-only package now, and they're going to all the big races. But they are now the Eurosport cycling podcast duo, and he's put music in, and that's just, I don't know, it's great. I listen to it on my walk to the train station at night, so they're absolutely excellent, and you should follow certainly Eurosport cycling podcast.
Yeah, definitely. And those are a group of guys who on Twitter are totally willing to interact with you, answer questions. I mean, they're completely fan friendly. So that's what I really love about those guys. Obviously there's some people out there doing some funny things too. I look at Cyclismas frequently, and one of the things that I love about what they're doing is this little video show. They have the Cyclismas News Network with Rip Finkelman and Johnny Gunn, and I think they are a riot. I've heard those guys have moved to Girona, and so it'll be interesting to see who they come in contact with. But they've had people on that show like David Harmon and Cohen DeCourt, and they get different pro riders to comment, and they also have Blazing Saddles, who I think is a riot. Kind of in a similar vein, Dan Worry and Neil Brown do a show every other Sunday night that's probably a little late for people in the UK to watch live, but they do tour chats. And this is a show where they have guests on, and they do kind of a live session with fans, and you can get on tour chats and you can ask questions. I think my favorite one last year was when they had Taylor Phinney and his father on, and it was literally an hour of Taylor and his dad Davis talking about their family, about racing, and you could ask questions. I typed in a couple questions, and Dan Worry put them forward, and they were answered. So that's another great way to interact with the fans. All right, so like I said before, if there's other ways that you guys follow cycling, please let us know. We're always looking for new sources of information. And one person that I would tell you to follow on Twitter that I really enjoy is Tour de Jose. Yes. She I don't know how she does it, but she tends to get the breaking news up there quicker than anybody else, and she doesn't always get the credit for it. Yeah. So I just want to tip my hat to her and tell her that I'm always following you, Jose, and I always look forward to your tweets. Okay, so Tim, we are going to do now our little sprint finish. Actually, we're not going to do that yet. We're going to talk about what's happening in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll do the sprint finish. So tell us, Tim, what's happening in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, let's rattle on through this. There aren't any World Tour races until the beginning of March, but there's plenty more races over the next couple of weeks. So following on from Qatar, let's start with, there's a couple of big races still in Asia. So firstly, we've got the Tour of Oman, which will probably have started by the time listeners hear this, but 6 days, a variety of interesting tests. There's some coastal sections, some lumpy finishes, and a real proper climbers test on Green Mountain at the end of stage 4. Vincenzo Nibali won that particular stage last year, and he carried that form all the way through and translated it into a GC win at Tirreno Adriatico a few weeks later. So Nibali and last year's winner Peter Velits, they're both back, along with 3 Tour de France champions, Wiggins, Contador and Cadel Evans.
Ooh,
not to mention, yeah, absolutely. And then you've got Joaquin Rodriguez, Chris Froome, Peter Sagan's there as well. I mean, it's amazing, really. Oman's not a World Tour race, but this starting lineup is stronger than you'll see in many of the World Tour races this season. So that's a pretty good race, and that's going to be well worth watching. Then following on from Oman, we've got the Tour de Langkawi, which is basically a sprint fest that's interrupted by a couple of really tough climbs in pretty hot and humid conditions. there's more pro teams this year entering. Garmin and Astana will be joined by Orica Green Edge, Blanco, and OPQS. This year, the Queen stage is actually quite early. It's on stage 3 out of 10. And it looks like there might be a few more opportunities for breakaway wins. So it may not be completely down to the sprinters this year. Having said that, Andrea Guardini, who was in Qatar, now riding with Astana, he's won 11 stages here over the last 2 years. So there's no guessing who my money is going to be on.
Yeah, I guess not. All right, what else is happening, Tim? We got
So back in Europe, we've got a cluster of stage races that mostly favour the kind of the climbers and the GC men, as the European season really starts to take off. So this week we've got the Tour du Haut-Var, which was won last year by Jonathan Tiernan Locke. It was one of the many performances early in the season that got him noticed by Sky. Then we've also got the Volta ao Algarve, which Richie Porte took last year, and that was really the first piece in the puzzle of Sky's season-long domination of stage races.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he turned out to be one of the guys in the Tour that was the key to the train going up the mountains and just shedding the rest of the peloton. Richie Porte, I mean, that was a great start to the season, and it just went on through July. So it'd be interesting to see what him. And then we have a doubleheader of semi-classics in Belgium, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the weekend of the 23rd and 24th, and first we've got Omloop Het Nieuwsblad, which I've no doubt pronounced horribly, which was a fantastic race last year. It was one of the few races in 2012 where Tom Boonen actually lost.
He lost in a sprint.
Yeah, to Sepp Van Marken. But that was a brilliant race. Not one of the best known races by any means, but absolutely well worth a look. And then the following day we've got Kuurne Brussels Kuurne, where Cavendish romped home ahead of Yauheni Hutarovic, which happened twice again in the Tour of Qatar last week. So again, that's they're just a little taster for what's to come with the big spring classics, but both very good races.
All right. Well, I look forward to the Belgian Classics. That is, obviously besides the Giro and the Tour, my favorite time of the year is those Belgian Spring Classics. Awesome. Okay, so now we will get to the sprint finish. Sorry, I had a little lead-out mishap there. Okay, so Tim, we're going to let you start. You can ask anybody a question, and they'll try to quickly answer it. So why don't you ask the first one?
Right. Well, in that case, Chris, let's kick off with you. So we did briefly have the UCI Independent Commission to look into doping. Now, we know that the UCI didn't share all the documents that they promised that they'd share with the Commission. They got into a bit of a slanging match with WADA, and then they said they couldn't afford to keep it going, so they just disbanded it. So what's your thoughts on this? Was it just a smokescreen by the UCI to buy time, or were they ever really serious about it?
It was a huge smokescreen. The UCI are the masters of this shell game, and frankly, the fans are tired of it, and that's what you heard in Louisville. And the fans are not going to be satisfied until Pat McQuaid and Hein Verbruggen are removed. So, read Neil Rogers' two-part interview on Velo News with Pat, and it doesn't leave you with the impression that he has the level of confidence to help cycling navigate the difficult waters that it's currently in. So that's my answer. Yes, it was a big smokescreen. Okay, so I guess since you asked me a question, it's my turn to ask. So, Kathy, how about Andre Greipel? Do you think if he and the Lotto boys were over at Qatar, how would they have fared against Cavendish and the Quick-Step team?
Well, I think that they probably would have given him quite a run for his money, and I don't think he would have won 4 stages by any means. I think that, I just love the Lotto Belisol guys. I think their train is just impeccable, and Greipel is just a monster. So I think, they might have split it 2-2 or something like that. Cav certainly wouldn't have had his way, I don't think. And coming on from that, I am going to ask Tim a Cavendish question because, we know that he's not interested in him whatsoever. And so my question to you, Tim, is Cavendish is saying that Milan-San Remo is not on his radar this year, that he isn't thinking of winning it. Do we believe him?
In a word, no. Cav's usually pretty honest and straightforward. Sometimes a little bit too much for his own good when he's angry with something or someone. But on this one occasion, I believe him about as much as I believe anything that comes out of Pat McQuaid's mouth. I think you just have to look at the kind of form he was carrying in Qatar. He's definitely looking leaner and fitter than he does at this point in the season in previous years. And while kicking sand in everyone's faces in Qatar would have been fun, Cav's always been about the big races, really. I think he will try to string everyone along, keep everyone guessing for as long as possible, and then he'll just parachute down to the start line like James Bond at the Olympic opening ceremony. Having said that, I still don't think he'll win it.
Yeah, I think, like you said last time, Tim, I think the Peloton's figured out how to beat Cavendish in Milan-San Remo. All right. Well, Tim, with that answer, I think that you win the sprint finish tonight. Bravo. All right. So that's it for tonight. But I just want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to us talk about our passion. We will be back on in probably about 2 weeks' time. Feel free to send us feedback via Twitter or via our website. Remember, you can find us at our blog at VeloVoices.com. You can find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/VeloVoices. We're on Twitter at VeloVoices. And now you can also find us on YouTube and Pinterest. You can actually see my clothing collection there. So with that, Tim, Kitty, thank you so much for joining tonight. And we will talk to you again soon.
Okay, see ya.
Good night.
VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling, for fans, by fans.